I don't think that there is such a thing as, getting to, your deathbed and not having any regrets. I think our job is to really, spend a lot of time thinking, talking to God, figuring out what our real purpose is, and moving in those directions where we won't have those regrets. And so for me, I think about it all the time. It's like, am I spending time doing the right things?
What is up, my dear friends, and welcome back to another episode of Honey, I'm Home. Today, I have a two-timing guest on the podcast show today.
The old two-timer.
The old two-timer. This is great. I'm excited to have you back on the show. I know I walked over, found you yesterday to ask if you'd jump on, and let's hold a conversation, continue the conversation about leadership. But before we dive into that, with the one and only Brian Hess, I want to kind of pick your brain on this idea real quick, man.
Okay.
And it was a story that I read this morning, and the story did come from a book called 5 Regrets of the Dying. And one of the regrets was people regretted working too much. And so there's this older man, he was 89 years old, and he said, when you're driven to work too hard, you ignore what matters, and what matters the most is family, enjoying friends, and spending quality times with those that you love the most. I want to hear your perspective because you are a hard-working man. And I honestly don't think that this is totally true as a regret for what you might regret in your life. I don't see this working too hard as going to be a regret in your life. And I want you to talk into the idea of, first thing is your thoughts on that. And secondly, for those that are working hard, feel like they're showing up all the time, consistently in their homes, and things are just maybe not going as well, how can they lead through that and not feel so regretful that they're spending all this time working?
Well, I think it's a complicated question. And I think so often in society that is used as an excuse for not achieving. Because it's an easy excuse. It's like, it's always there. It's always in the back of my mind, right? It's like, am I making these sacrifices for the right reasons? Am I, I'm on the road a lot. I'm flying a lot. I, spend time away from my family. I would also argue that if you don't do that, if there is no sacrifice, then life becomes the sacrifice, right? Like your experiences or lack thereof become the sacrifice. And so for me, I've answered this question to myself by trying to integrate as much of family and business as I possibly could, by having the people that work here be people of character and people of values that I can consider friends and family. And so I don't, it's not that I don't have friends outside of our companies, but I have built in, people that care around me, and, people that I genuinely enjoy doing the things that, if you say like, man, I regret working too much, it's like, well, did the people that you work with suck that bad? Or like, what's the reason that you would feel
you
that
didn't
way?
like what you were doing? Or?
Exactly. You didn't love what you were doing. Maybe your children weren't interested in it or couldn't be a part of it in any way. And so for me, whether it's the TCS retreats with my kids being there, my kids knowing the other kids of the contractors that we work with across the country, people coming to my house for the holidays, I've really tried to solve that problem. With that said, I don't think the problem can go away. And I don't suggest that I will be, hopefully 100-something years old and sitting there wondering if I did the right thing. I think that's part of life also. I don't think that there is such a thing as, getting to, your deathbed and not having any regrets. I think our job is to really, spend a lot of time thinking, talking to God, figuring out what our real purpose is, and moving in those directions where we won't have those regrets. And so for me, I think about it all the time. It's like, am I spending time doing the right things? And, so I compare it like this. My wife and I have had this conversation. When I'm on the road or I'm at an event here locally and I can't I'm not home that particular evening. Like there's something to, and I also think the reason that I said this can be used as kind of an excuse or a reason that, people don't achieve. I also think that kids, I've got 5 of them, so I
Yeah.
can speak with some expertise here. It's
Yeah.
like most of the time they don't need more than like a few minutes, 30 minutes, maybe an hour.
Yeah.
And then they're done with me. Like they're done with me. I'm not done with them ever.
Yeah.
But like they're done with me, right?
Sure.
And
That's a good
so I
perspective.
think it's like, are you there? Are you
Mm.
reminding them, like, dude, I tell my kids every single day, man, like how much I love them. And, our like running joke is I always say, like, can I tell you a secret? And they all say, let me guess, I love you. And I'm like, how do you know? Because you tell me every day. And I'm like,
Wow.
you're damn straight I do, man.
I want you to get bored from that.
I never want them. I think about this a lot, man. When I'm traveling, it's like, what if something happens? What if today was it? Like, if I didn't give my kids enough love, attention, just that foundation that their dad really thinks the world of them, loves them, believes in them, that they know they can do anything because I've given them enough by whatever age it is, 4 years old. Hopefully Preston knows at 4 years old that he can do anything he wants in life. And, that's my mission with my kids. And so I think you're always going to question, where you spend your time. Like for me, I always use the comparison of like, a scale, like the lawyer scale, right?
Yeah,
There's like
yeah.
2 sides to
Of
it.
course.
I don't think you ever achieve true balance. I think you're in pursuit of it. You're always on one side or the other. You're always, feeling like you spend a little too much time at work, or maybe you're relaxing a little too much.
Sure.
And I think guilt can be a positive thing. It can be something that drives you, or it can be something that you wear like a weighted vest, And for me, I've taken the action to try and integrate my family into everything that we do as much as I can. My kids literally ask me nonstop to come to the office all the time. And so, that's something that I think we'll see some more and more in the future of like, people wanting to bring their kids around, getting real experience. You already see kind of a questioning of higher education, whether it's right for all kids or not. And so I think you'll see more of that where people start to integrate and their kids maybe following more often in their parents' footsteps.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of that away, because you don't have to feel like you have to choose. It's like you can do both, and so I try to bring my kids to as much of our company things as I can without, doing it too much. That's a balance too. So, I think there's some truth to it, man, but I think it's more often used as an excuse than it is valid.
Man, I like where you're going with that, and I want you to help me understand a little bit when, as a business owner, you own multiple businesses, one being the Pavement Group, the other one TCS, and One Team Media, and that's what this show is brought to you by, is One Team Media, and excited that we get to host this show here, and ultimately, like, how do you continue, because I want to learn this for myself, but I also want to help people out there that, almost take for granted what they have at home. You have multiple decisions to make, I think, soon as you enter your door, whether it's how you're going to show up, what you're going to do, because you're talking about quality time. And it's like your kids, by the sounds of it, don't really need a lot of your time. They just need high quality time. So, when you're at home, what choices are you, questioning that you should begin to focus on? Like, how do you show up inside your home so that love isn't lost or the connection isn't lost, or, because, dude, I always fear that the flame of love is going to dwindle in time, because that's what we see in our culture nowadays. Is like, in time, love is lost, the connection is lost, and relationships fall apart, and people fall apart, homes fall apart. Like, I'm asking you, how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? Because you and Lori have been married for how many years now?
2014. So we've been together since 2000. So been together for 14 years, married for 10 of those.
How have you been able to sustain that flame of love in your home in a manner that allows you to achieve such a great accomplishment of that?
I think this might be a strange answer for a lot of people that they would think it's a different answer, but it's like being willing to communicate regardless of what that means. Whether that's an argument or a misunderstanding or, like hurting each other's feelings by, just expressing what you're expressing. But it's like being willing to love each other through, those misunderstandings. Because, one of the things that Lori would tell you if she was sitting here is that I'm a very honest person. Like,
Yeah.
probably more than she would like sometimes.
Sure.
But I've made a rule in my life that I never want, like, I'll never resent my wife. Because if I don't tell the truth and I'm not honest about whatever it is, sometimes it's like, hey, the house is messy.
Yeah.
And it makes me uncomfortable because, like, I don't like messiness, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if the house is a mess, like, we have 5 kids. So, like, it's a hard thing to keep up with, But if the house is messy or I feel like, that balance isn't there where, she's kind of pulling her side of it. I express that. And sometimes it's not popular, but it's necessary because otherwise I'll hold that in. And so what happens with people that I fortunately or unfortunately, fortunately that people trust me enough to talk about it, unfortunately that it happens so much. Like I get a lot of conversations about, difficulties in people's marriages, and it almost always, high 90s percentile, that it is a lack of communication. That somebody thinks they're doing their wife or their husband a favor by not expressing what they don't like. Because I don't want to hurt your feelings.
100%.
So I'm going to save you from the truth. It's like, man, the truth doesn't go away. The truth is forever. And so if you don't like something today, the chances of you like starting to like what you didn't like, very low.
Yeah, sure.
And so for me, it's just, I'm respectful. I don't, we don't name call. I don't, like none of that stuff. But like, there has to be a high level of communication to the fact that, like, this is the life that we've embarked on together. It's not, and by the way, I think that people need to lower their expectations of like what it actually looks like. Because I think, young people today watch movies or they see, whatever it is on social media, and they think these like dream lives or marriages or things are the way it is. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but in 45 years, I've yet to meet one. And so, it always takes work and it always takes communication. So like lower your expectations of your partner, because they're not going to be perfect. What I tell the people that I talk to all the time is like, man, communicate more. Be willing to argue if that's what it takes. That's never the goal, right? But like, be willing to fight for the love that you have. And I think Lori and I have done a good job of that. It's like, we're willing to, do what it takes to be able to understand each other better. And like, I feel like you fall deeper and deeper in love with a person and you appreciate them more. You have more gratitude for their willingness to listen to difficult things, for their willingness to, bear the burden of, the life that we've built. Because the life that we build isn't just 3 businesses and 5 children and our marriage. And it's, everybody that's attached to that. It's like we did that together. And like, Lori, to some degree feels responsible for everybody here just the same as I do.
She should.
And so she supports that. And, I think that people give up too soon. We live in a society where, it's so easy. Like you'll just get advice from somebody that says like, oh, you should just get divorced. And it's like, and this is something that I really want people to hear. Like, dude, the next human being that you are with is going to be just as imperfect as the last one. They just have different imperfections. And, so if you're not good at dealing with imperfection and embracing them, like get ready because it's coming again. It'll just look different, feel different, whatever.
Yeah.
But like at the end of it, it's going to be the same. And you're going to have to deal with certain circumstances regardless. Life is messy and not perfect. And the more that you stay to that, and listen, there's things that Lori and I have figured out over the years. Like there's a couple years ago, I set a goal, like date night with my wife every week. And at the end of the year, we had gone on 54 dates. It's like, dude, yeah. And the year before, if you would have told me I could pull that off, I would have probably questioned whether or not that was possible. Just schedule and dynamics and sitters and this, and it's not easy. But if you don't prioritize it,
Sure.
it's just like anything else. If you don't tend to it, you don't tend to your garden, what happens to the vegetables?
Withers away.
They die. And the same is true for your relationship. And so, like, I would say this. I'll just, wrap this up by saying, like, love is always worth it, man. Because without it, what do you got? At the end of your life, you want to have no regrets, have a lot of people that love you, and have relationships that are meaningful, and a marriage that's meaningful, relationships with your kids that are meaningful. And that is, nobody's going to care how much money you got in your bank account. Nobody's going to, people might care what you accomplish, but like, just look at it. Steve Jobs is a good example. Like that guy changed the world. And like, I'm sure his family, loves him and appreciates him and misses him. But at the end of the day, we come and go. And it's only those people that we genuinely impact, emotionally, like close to us, that are going to make a difference. And that little seed that we plant by having those interactions, by teaching people, by being patient with people, by loving our children, by loving our spouses, like those seeds get spread to other people. Because now, my wife, through our experiences, I can sit here with you and my wife can talk to her friends, and hopefully we're making a positive impact on other people by our own experiences and knowledge and all that stuff. And so the same is true for everybody else. Like, lean into that stuff, lean into the discomfort, lean into the difficult moments and communicate through them, and you'll be better for it. And you'll, not just in your marriage, but in every aspect of your life, you'll learn how to be a better communicator. And when you are, everything in life gets easier, more fulfilling. You don't carry that weight around that a lot of people experience. And so, long answer to a great question.
Man, that was huge. And I want to, it brings up another question, but I want to kind of share what I took away from that, which is, if you want to build a strong relationship currently or in the future, you've got to learn how to double down on your communication. And if you're not willing to communicate and you're wanting to sit in your own, resentfulness, because you are going to build that up because you're not seeing that they're doing your fulfilling your expectations, whether they're spoken or non-spoken, right? How do you, like, for people that, and I know, like, I've been there before, but like, it sometimes seems a little bit easier to say nothing than to go into a conversation that's super uncomfortable and is going to raise probably more problems. I think, how does one begin to navigate that conversation that feels very uncomfortable? Because I do agree with you. I think communication is key. And it was actually the very thing that I fell in love with my wife for, was her ability to communicate and to be receptive of the tough conversations and not like point her finger at me and call me names and, make me feel like I'm not valid, or like she heard me. Whether I was right or wrong, she still listened. But like, how does one begin to navigate those tough conversations, or build up the courage to hold those tough conversations with somebody that they need to talk to, rather than hold that resentfulness? How do you navigate all of that?
Well, the first thing is choosing to do the difficult, because the easy part is to avoid it.
Yeah.
And, but that's the perception. It's not the truth. What is it? Conflict delayed is conflict multiplied.
Ugh, not fun.
And
Yeah,
so
fun,
I want everybody that's listening to or watching this show to understand, like, taking the easy way actually makes it more difficult later. It does not eliminate anything. And timing is a big deal. Like,
sure.
There is a bad time to tell your wife certain things. There is a bad time to tell your husband certain things.
Sure.
There's bad time to tell, people that you work with a certain thing. Like, when emotions are high, people are in emotional duress, like, there's certain times. So be wise about when you have these conversations. It's not just, do it immediately. But conflict delayed is conflict multiplied is a real thing, because, again, you think you're doing the right thing by saving somebody's feelings. Dude, I just had a difficult conversation today that I've been delaying for a few days because I
Yeah.
was waiting for the right frame, the right scenario. But I will always have the conversation. It's just a matter of how,
Or
how
when.
it should be done.
Yeah.
Because the other option is just, rip the Band-Aid off. And, we all know people like that, a bull in a china shop type person that
Sure.
just doesn't have any awareness of like when something like that should happen.
True.
But it's again, it's that willingness to just jump in, man. And like, one of my old bosses used to say this to me, when it came to business, but I think it's applicable in all of these scenarios. He'd say, Brian, what are they going to do? Eat you?
Huh. Yeah.
It's like, dude, nothing
That's interesting.
bad is going to happen
Yeah.
as a result of you, communicating. Now,
Well,
if
I
you're a
hope not.
jerk, if you're name calling or you're, screaming or you're, using
Yeah.
any extreme method of communication, well then, those circumstances can certainly change. And I think we all go through, points in our life where that happens too,
Yeah.
right? And we're human. Those things are going to happen at some point. But you got to learn to control that. You got to learn that like the person with the highest volume isn't the one that gets hurt. The person that repeats themselves the most or
Yeah.
holds on to something isn't the one that wins the communication back and forth. It's the person that has the right balance. Again, the word communication, people think it's communicating, talking. Communication is not talking. It's the combination of talking and listening. And generally speaking, the person that listens the most, whether it's business, marriage, relationships, talking to your children, it's the person that knows how to listen when it's appropriate. That wins in life in any aspect of it, because the other person's going to have a lot to say, and if you just want to be the talker, it doesn't work very well. Anybody that's been in that type of scenario where communication is necessary and needed and really important, they'd tell you like doesn't work very well when you don't listen. When all you want to do is get your point across, maybe flip that and say, how can I be a better listener? Because, if you want to be understood, first seek to understand. And, when you understand the other person, you're going to have a better way of communicating what it is that you have to say. A lot of times there's a lockup in communication because both are trying to make a point. Neither one wants to listen. So choose to be the listener, and if you can listen and you can, it's not about proving the other person wrong. It's about listening, trying to understand, and then trying to go at your communication from a different method. And I think, a lot of us are, kind of taught poor communication young because that's what we see, or,
Yeah, absolutely.
a lot of families that, I interact with, like their family life was ones that didn't communicate well. If there's an argument, everybody just kind of went to their room, pretended it didn't happen. That doesn't work either, right? It's like,
That's true.
we got to lean into that stuff and, find a way to effectively communicate. And so many times, man, the answer is doing more listening and less talking.
Yeah, or more listening, less talking. That makes me think about why it's hard for me to listen, or why it's hard for people to listen. And so when anger or emotion comes up in those moments of communication or conflict or whatever you want to call it, right? How have you been able to? Because to me, man, you're a heart-driven leader. To me, you're someone who gives grace, shows up with more love than hurt, than heart. You show up with a lot of emotion. I think you're a very intuitive and emotionally, you wear your heart on your sleeve type of guy, right? You believe in the best in people. As a leader, like, I'm sure that you've had some tough conversations where you might feel anger, or you might feel frustrated, or you might feel these certain ways. I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to communicate. So how do you kind of maybe pull yourself back? And I'm not saying you've been perfect at it, because I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, how have you been able to pull your emotions back so you separate yourself from those emotions so that you don't let that emotion to drive the conversation?
Yeah, I think, experience is a big piece of this, right? It's like, I hate to say that because, again, I never want younger people to use this as an excuse or a crutch, but like, there is something that happens to you as you get older. Now, the way that you can get this sooner is by being a younger person that spends time or gets mentorship from somebody who's been there and done that and can
Sure.
kind of give you this type of advice. But it's like, you know, that conversation, 99% of the conversations we have do not have much of a result in 5 years from now, right? It's like, you know, it's a momentary conversation that's relative to something that just happened that's not going to have a massive impact on, you know, the future. There are some that do, right? It's like, you know, whether or not somebody continues to work for a company or not. That's a big conversation, right? Because somebody missing from a company could be a massive loss. Somebody staying at a company could also be a massive loss.
Yeah.
And so it's realizing in that moment that like emotions can only manipulate a conversation.
Ooh.
Like they can only manipulate it
Sure.
for better or for worse. They cannot, it will not stay the same because of emotions.
Gotcha.
And so for me, I try to remind myself of like the fact that this is going to be skewed if I let my emotions get the best of me. It's not going to be something that comes across from my heart because, you know, from the heart to the mouth, like, you know, if emotions are involved, it's going to be, you know, over communicated, under communicated, right?
Yeah.
If you're fearful or angry, it's like that spectrum in between there. It's going to alter the message. And so, and by the way, I also believe that emotions are an important part of communicating because sometimes somebody does need to feel the frustration or the anger or the, you know, but it's got to be like within, you know, like there's just like anything, it's relative. Like you can't just fly off the handle and expect people to walk away like understanding what you said, right?
That makes sense.
And so, you know, again, emotions will do nothing but manipulate a conversation. It will cause people to be defensive. It will cause people to be cautious. It will cause the other person to not communicate if you have a level of anger involved.
Absolutely.
A lot of people, that's I don't like using the word, but it's a trigger for a lot of people because they've been around anger, and so that shuts them down. Like they have no ability. It's not that they're trying to avoid things; it's that like that actually causes a physiological response in people that shuts them down and doesn't allow their brain to function like the same way as it would. And so I think number one, it's so important that in the moment you just realize. I've been in this scenario lots, man, with my kids, with my wife, with people here, you know, where, you know, somebody does something that's really frustrating. And you got to realize, like, even your spouse, who is your person, your ride or die, like, dude, they're still living their life, you know, they're still living their own life from their own perspective, experiences, etc. And, like, you can't make them see what you see.
Yeah.
And so, and sometimes you're not going to make that happen. And you got to be okay with that. It's like, man, there's a million things that I wish I could have made my wife understand along the way that I never got her to understand. And we still love each other. So, like, you know, does it really matter? No, most things don't. And so, you know, what matters most is your love for one another, your love for God, your family, like peace matters most. Like peace in your heart. And again, like caveat there, like peace doesn't happen if you're always being walked on. There's got to be boundaries. But like peace is the goal. Peace and happiness is the goal. Not being right.
Yeah, man, that is huge. Sometimes are you trying to be right, or are you trying to lose a spouse? You know, like that is something that I always try to.
Being right and being happy are not always in the same conversation, man. You can be right and miserable, and or you could be wrong and happy. And you know, I'd rather be wrong or, you know, quote unquote lose the argument.
Yeah.
And just be happy, you know, because at the end of the day, man, am I gonna love them anyway? Yeah, you know, I'd like to get my point across sometimes. I'd like to be heard, as you just said. I'd like to be, you know, understood, and there be action taken to, you know, what bothers me.
Yep.
But is everything that bothers me a deal breaker? No.
Brian, I have one final question for you. And the Honey I'm Home podcast, I have a mission to help people create happier homes by starting with happier hearts within themselves. But what is one way in which people can begin to cultivate happier cultures within their own homes?
You just said it, man. It starts with you. You know, I think there's a huge disparity in our country right now between, you know, what people think reality is about life and what reality really is. I think people are being sold a bill of goods about what's going to actually make them happy. And, you know, what makes you happy is like, you know, making progress, you know, feeling good about yourself, winning more days than you're losing. And, you know, I think that people believe that those wins and losses are more out of their control than they are. I think, you know, there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of happiness, there's a lot of stability, there's a lot of fulfillment that comes from a good hard day's of work, you know? And I don't mean like physical labor. I just mean like, you know, at the end of the day, you feel like I did something today that made a difference. You know, I did something today that helped people. I did something today that's moving me forward, you know, because I just talked about this on my show this morning. It's like we become so dependent on the validation of other people that we lose ourselves. You know, we lose that ability to be genuinely happy with what we do. It's like, I don't wake up every day seeking other people's validation. Now, you know, do I want my wife to be happy about what I do? Do I want my parents to be proud of me? Of course. But it's not going to break my happiness if they don't. If my parents aren't proud of me tomorrow,
that's huge.
I would look at it and say, like, why aren't they happy? Or why aren't they proud of me?
Yeah.
But it wouldn't change. Like, you know, at this point in my life, like, I am pretty set on what I'm trying to do and what I need to do every day in order to make that happen for me and for other people around me. And so, like, I don't seek any external validation. You know, if I put a post out on Instagram and it doesn't get enough likes or comments, it doesn't change my day in a bit.
Yeah.
Like nothing.
That's different.
And so, you know, I think that's so important, man. It's like the work that you do on yourself is the best gift that you can give to others. It's the best gift you can give to God for blessing you with the life that you have. It's the way that you build self-confidence, self-respect. It's like, do the things you say you're going to do. You know, you say, you know, you're going to go help this person, you go show up and help them. You say you're going to commit to this thing, you go do it, because that's what builds self-confidence. It's what builds self-worth. Like, you can manufacture that. You can't be dependent on anybody else for it. And there was a point in my life where I feel like I needed a lot of validation from a lot of people. And man, I look back at that now and I'm like, man, no wonder everything was such a roller coaster. No wonder there were so many crazy hands dealt to me in that season of my life. And so, you know, when you look in the mirror, it's okay to not like things. It's okay, you know, it's okay to like, hey, I'm going to go on this diet and I'm not going to eat the cookie, and, you know, you eat the cookie. Like, but it's, you know, just realize that those are the things that erode self-confidence, happiness, eventually you don't trust yourself. And so work on that. Work on trusting yourself, being a better person, making progress every day, valuing people, doing something kind for people, seeing people. You know, we had a tailgate for the home opener, and there was, you know, a couple people there that were, you know, a little out of control, right? Like, you know, people that showed up at the tailgate. I don't know what their stories were completely.
Yeah.
But it became a scene, right? And so for me, one of my missions is to value people. And so in that moment where everybody is, you know, kind of standing back, taking videos, taking pictures, you know, having fun, for me, it was important to know to walk up to those people.
You did.
Speak to them and know that that's Anna and Victor, and I know their stories and I know who they are. And like, I think we could do more of that in the world. And I think when we do, you know, we feel better about ourselves. I'm gonna, you know, have fun with those people just as much as anybody else is. I think that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
You know, they're there for entertainment value. But it also is important for people that probably don't feel seen to feel seen, and it's good for you to be the person or the vehicle that allows those people to feel seen. And so, the work you do on yourself is always the best work for others. It's like, maybe instead of trying to fix everybody else, you just focus on yourself first, and maybe your example fixes everybody else.
Dude, that's really good, man. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm going to wrap it up with this, Brian. I am eternally, and I mean this, I am so grateful for you and your wisdom, and I'm grateful that God put me on this earth the same time that you're walking this earth. I think that you're a very special individual, in a manner that a lot of people can genuinely follow. And I ask those who follow me, you always say, look for your mentor's mentor, right? And I'm telling you, like, if you're coming to me, you should also be showing up on Brian's page, because this is daily wisdom that we get fed. You can find him on One Team Media. You can find him on the Real Brian Hess at everywhere. And I'll be sure to link that in the show notes below. But if you guys could do me a huge favor, if you've been enjoying this podcast, honey, I'm home, be sure to like and subscribe. Go over on One Team Media and go over on the Real Brian Hess, because this man is a true heart-driven leader, meaning that he lives from his heart and gives grace and shows up and is who he says he is. And there's not many people out there that are like that. And if you want more of that in your life, like I said, be sure to go check him out at the Real Brian Hess, and also can be found on One Team Media YouTube. Outside of that, my dear friends, if you found this podcast helpful, supportive, encouraging, and/or uplifting, be sure to share it out with 1, 2, or 3 of your friends. And like always, my name is Tylerjoestratton, and this is Honey, I'm Home.